I feel like you're sitting in my office with me.
So,
okay, here we go.
This is very timely. Thank you so much for joining us, Frances.
Thank
you.
It's
an honor. It's very timely because, you know, one of my jobs with Elephant Journal is to write about every single issue, you know, macro or micro in environmentalism that comes up. And I have to say, sometimes I get, like the last couple days, I get really depressed and really sad. You know, I just reported on this story where like the last orangutans were clinging to the last tree in Indonesia because you know, the West wants palm oil and vegetable oil in our peanut butter and our, you know, and you know, there's this heartbreaking photo of this like last tree getting mowed down, and the orangutans are starving and haven't had water in days, and you know, you just see the destruction, kind of out of sight, out of mind destruction that we're you know, that we're kind of responsible for indirectly. Unfortunately, we don't see it often or think about it. So your book seems to directly address that, but in a very hopeful way. Maybe you could tell us a bit about kind of, you know, are you an optimist or a pessimist, or is there another possibility?
Yes, thank you for that lead-in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know that I do not call myself an optimist.
Yeah.
I do not call myself a pessimist. I am a dyed-in-the-wool possibilist, meaning that if you really absorb an ecological worldview, the one thing that's got to hit you is that possibility is virtually endless, in the sense of what characterizes an ecological worldview for me is that continually to remind myself that everything is being shaped moment to moment by everything else. The nature of reality is continuous change, and therefore we're all co-creating. And so it's not possible to know what's possible. Mm-hmm. And so I try to stay in that sense of possibility. And it requires a certain kind of humility that I hit me about 10 years ago when I traveled the world with my daughter. And we reported on these incredible breakthroughs in terms of food and the environment. And I had to acknowledge when we got home, I said, you know, honey, when I was your age, if somebody had said that Wangari Maathai was going to plant 7 trees and then they would become millions of trees, and of course now billions of trees, would I have said, oh yeah, sure, that's going to happen? No, I wouldn't. So what I talk about is a sense of possibility that is kind of staying in that point of humility that we can't know, and therefore we have to act knowing that our actions have impact. We ultimately know how full that can be, but we have to know that the impact will be there because we live in an interconnected world.
I just actually, another blog I put up recently was Stephen Colbert interviewing President Bill Clinton, and Clinton said something right in line with what you just said. He said everything is interconnected. So if you understand how the world works, the most selfish possible thing you can do is to care about the environment and care about others. Like, it's actually really selfish in a good way. Like, it's really intelligent for all of us to, you know, Colbert was making fun of Clinton, saying, why are you always trying to do all this good stuff with the Clinton Foundation? You know, what's your angle? But, you know, I guess to come back and challenge you a bit from the pessimistic point of view is, when I lived in Boston, I went to the Red Sox games frequently. You know, in terms of climate change, it feels a little bit like, you know, the 8th inning and we're down by 10 runs. And sure, there's a possibility that we're going to have a huge inning in the 9th. But how do we, I guess, how do we communicate very quickly about, you know, the notion of ecosystem that you talk about so eloquently? You know,
well, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. I mean, I think it's absolutely clear for anyone who's at all awake that climate change has now progressed so far that we will all be affected for generations and generations, and much adaptation and much change. The question is, how I think of it is that it's not a problem that defeats the human spirit. It's not a challenge that human beings, put us under. It's that sense of futility, the sense that there's nothing that we can do that's meaningful. And I think of that. Remember the tragedy when those miners in Chile were trapped underground for a long time, and afterward many had post-traumatic stress syndrome? Mm-hmm. But one didn't, and he was the one who was organizing the others and keeping them motivated and distributing the food and felt empowered. So the question is, yes, we do face now. It's not like catastrophe is coming. Catastrophe. There are now 868 million people in the world who are so undernourished that that the extreme form of undernourishment. So we are already in a catastrophic situation. So the question is not whether it's catastrophic or not, but how do we feel about it? Can we engage and stay alive and keep that force of life loves life flowing through us in such a time? And that's what my book is about, because when you talked about this story about the orangutan, I felt, when I walked out of a conference a few years ago, I felt like I'd just been hit with a ton of bricks. When I was learning, just brilliant environmental speaking, and yet I felt defeated when I walked out the door. And I said, this is not going to work. There's got, if this is, me, who I think of myself as so fired up, if I was feeling so disempowered. So that's why I wrote this book, Eco Mind, because I wanted to reframe the messages that I'm sending about the environment so that they make us feel more powerful and prepare us to work on exactly the skills we need to make this change at a deep systemic level. And that's really what the book is about, a reframe.
So inspiring. I've been watching these videos, Matt Damon, a good Cambridge boy or Boston boy, trying to address the clean water shortage around the world with water.org. And there is a sense in those videos, even though it's, somewhat heartbreaking, the reality of the situation is really difficult for so many millions of people. The videos are inspiring and fun, and there is a kind of can-do sense. So is that sort of what you're talking about, that if people like me stop saying, oh, this is horrible and this is wrong and you're doing this wrong, and sometimes I feel like this kind of grumpy old man. I'm talking to my friends about to-go cups and plastic waste, and people don't seem to really care sometimes, even in Boulder, where we have a reputation for being green. My next door neighbors who have a chicken coop in their backyard, they're college kids and they have a chicken coop. They're getting into local food. It's pretty inspiring. But they also have 3 SUVs parked right there. So how do we communicate to the next generation, particularly in that powerful kind of fun way, if that's what you're saying?
Well, I just wrote a blog for Huffington Post called Instant Gratification, My How You've Grown. And my argument, it took off from an article in the New York Times about LED lights and how they're too expensive and they're not going to take off because of that, and people want instant gratification. And so I reframed, wait a minute, what gives me instant gratification? I get it when I really feel gratified by taking my laundry out of the cold water wash and hanging it on a rack or on the line, and I'm feeling kind of smug and kind of gratified that I'm not using the dryer. Right. And and of course in my diet, when I choose a low on the food chain diet and know that is part of what we need to do, certainly organic food and growing organically can make a huge difference in climate change because it sequesters more carbon than chemical agriculture does. And so I can feel actually gratified with every mouthful that I'm part of the solution. So I think it's that as long as we are using fear as a primary motivator, we're really in trouble, because psychologists now tell us that actually when human beings are reminded of our mortality, that it makes us more clutching and more materialistic and more othering, including each other, like environmentalists, and even nature becomes the other. So I think all the messages that I want to put out have to do with the fact that that none of us are benefiting from the current order that is based in the fear of scarcity that I began as a young woman to explode when I realized there's more than enough food in the world.
Right.
And so I want to be part of messaging that's saying that we can take a deep breath. We don't have to be in this constant fearful struggle if we align our lives with nature's laws. And so it's not a question that we've hit the limits of a finite earth. In my book, Eco Mind, I take that and I flip it around and say, no, 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 no. It's not that we've hit the limits of a finite earth. It's that we have disrupted the laws of nature. And so we are wasting and destroying. It's not nature's limits that are a problem. It's the systems that we've created, and show how much waste is built into our system. Today in the U.S., most of the energy that goes into a power plant is wasted. In fact, estimates are as high as over 80% of U.S. energy is wasted,
Wow.
as somewhere between 40 and 50% of our food, and on and on. So it's really a message that once we understand what makes us happy, and there's so much new stuff on that I love from neuroscience and anthropology about just what is human nature and how we do enjoy being decision makers and feeling connected to others. It's foundational to us, just what we need now. So we're not going against human nature. We're trying to go with human nature's need to feel effective, and that we understand more the laws of nature. And of course, food is my big thing. And we now know that if the whole world went organic, that we can increase food production as much as 50%.
Wow.
And so it's not, that we'll be told, oh, organic, that's a luxury, we can't feed the world that way. The opposite is true, because we have so much evidence from the Global South that using now all the knowledge we're building, excuse me, about ecological practices, they show immediate, increases in yields, and also, of course, decrease in the cost, so people can escape hunger as they go organic. So it's not about being a good news girl. It's about reframing how we think of the problem. That the problem is not, oh, we greedy human beings, we've just, broken all the barriers. It's that we have fallen for very false ideas about the nature, our nature, and wider nature. And so way I talk about it in my book is it's moving from a diagnosis of limits and making us feel, oh, we've got to shrink, 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 to a diagnosis, oh, we have malaligned, we've perversely aligned ourselves and our economic system with nature and human nature, and we now know how to make that work. And we see it in every field, whether it's energy, whether it is food. We know the solutions. It's just that too many people feel powerless. And so it's really a book about empowerment.
Well, it's beautiful. I interviewing people, I normally interrupt constantly, and I could just listen to you
You're so
for
sweet.
a long time. No, it's refreshing. And I do think in my own life, like the environmental things I do are generally fun and give me joy. They're not from a sense of sort of, trying to punish my evil human nature. Like I bicycle every day and, things like that. And then, you look at the opposite, and like I just visited some of my family in Virginia, which is a beautiful country, and they're, cutting the tops off mountains, and the population has a pretty extreme problem with obesity and diabetes because people aren't getting that kind of exercise on their bikes. You see that the kind of conventional systems we've created aren't actually making us happier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, do you know what figure it just blew my mind? It says it all to me about how malaligned our system is with our own nature. Do you know, in the last half century, that rates of suicide worldwide have increased by about 60%.
Have
And
increased.
that now more people commit suicide than die every year from homicide and war.
Wow.
So that says to me that this is not working for us. It's not like, oh, we've had it so good and now we have to cut back. No, this isn't working for almost all of us. There's a tiny percent who maybe feel it is working, but I don't know them.
Yeah.
I don't know people who are greatly at ease with the way things are. So it's really how, the other thing that I stress in EcoMind is the great delight, and of course I have to keep reminding myself this, the first lesson of ecology is that every organism is shaped by every other organism in the environment, right? And so we are all creatures of our context. That means, first of all, what human beings do we relate to. So if we want to become more powerful, if we want to become possibilists, we can do that by choosing to, and I'm going to do a pitch for you guys, tuning in and following the kind of things that you're communicating. I'm associated with Yes Magazine, and I'm proud to be, and that's another example, Solutions Magazine. And I tell people that if you want to be a possibilist, if you want to make a difference in the world, then virtually every day we have to bring into our consciousness something, somewhere, that is beginning to shift this downward spiral into a spiral of possibility that is aligned with nature. Because that's how we actually can change our brains. This is the great discovery of neoplasticity, that we can live in a state of fear and a state of, we've hit the wall, or we can live in a state of possibility. And a lot of it depends on who our friends are, what we read on a daily basis, what we expose ourselves to, and we can control that. And that is power. And it has nothing to do with being kind of naive and Pollyanna in the simplistic sense. It is taking our power as possibilists.
Well, that's a very interesting subject because, elephant is very popular in the yoga communities and the green communities. And there's a lot of sort of, what you could call magical thinking, where, oh, I'm seeing these, to go back to the orangutans or the plastic island in the middle of the Pacific, oh, that's negative, I'm going to ignore that, and I'm going to go back to driving my SUV to yoga class. So you're not advocating naivete or ignoring suffering or pain, but you're saying the way we get out of that is to face it and with a smile, in a way, to change it.
And figure out how we can be more courageous. One of the things that I've learned by studying how we got into this mess over these years, and I feel that we're good enough, we're so pro-social. We evolved in these tightly knit tribes, but it's very hard for us, therefore, to break from the tribe. And so if the tribe is heading over Victoria Falls, metaphorically, as I put it now, it's still hard to break, with the SUV or whatever the status. So that's the key. It's not just bringing in stories of possibility, but also stories of courage and carrying in our hearts people more courageous than we, and we need them. And for me, it's Wangari Maathai, a woman I met in 2000 who won the Nobel Peace Prize and passed away 2 years ago. She's with me virtually every day, somebody who planted 7 trees on Earth Day, but just then decided she was going to fight desertification. And it went from, as I mentioned, from a 7 to a few thousand, then millions, and then she teamed up with the UNEP, the Environmental Program, and started Plant for the Planet. And it's now about 12 billion trees that has happened, much beyond what the UNEP predicted. So part of, I guess, my core advice is that we all be asking why constantly, that we didn't get here just by a fluke. It was because I believe we are creatures of the mind and we create the world according to our belief system. And our belief system is about scarcity and lack and this competitive struggle. And so we keep asking why, and we keep seeing ways to be powerful. And that means bringing examples into our lives, and we will become more like the people, the courageous people that we seek out. That's the power to change ourselves, is to change the world.
Well, Frances, very inspiring personally, and I think for our 1.3 million readers a month right now. And
that's impressive.
Yeah, it's been
your influence. Your influence is incredible. Now, on this, I just read this wonderful book. I know we need to go, but this wonderful book called Connected, pointing out that each of us, we don't just influence our friends, we influence their friends, and then their friends, 3 layers out. So it's the influence we each have by what people observe in us is absolutely astounding.
Well, we're only as worthwhile, our influence is only as worthwhile as the wisdom that we can share. So thank you, and thanks for your good cheer as well.
Oh, it's been wonderful. Thank you.
All right, Frances, thank you so much. Okay.